Hello, my friends. D.L. Anderson here. Welcome back to Transformation by Truth podcast as we share the truth concerning these last days and what you must do to save yourself from the violent times that are just ahead. Today's podcast is a word of truth accounting of the end times. The end is coming. The end is near. Today's podcast is entitled End Times 523, The Spiritual Disease of Deception, Part 3, The Path to Purging Ourselves of the Misconceptions We Possess. The podcast objectives are reveal the foundation of every false reality, analyze how misconception pushes you deeper into the darkness, analyze the role of complacency in misconception, and reveal how we eliminate our misconceptions. Welcome. Now, before we begin today's lesson, I would like to welcome all my beloved brothers and sisters in Yahushua Messiah who have been scattered to the four corners of the earth, who Yahuwah has joined to this ministry for such a time as this. I would also like to welcome anyone who is engaging our podcast or videos for the first time. We trust you were led by the set apart spirit in finding us. And if you continue to be led, we hope you stay with us. For these are troubling times, and an evil day is just ahead. To this end, if you are watching this video on YouTube and you have not subscribed to our channel, click the subscribe button below, and you will be alerted whenever we post new videos. Also, if you have any questions at the conclusion of this video, you can ask them using the link in the podcast description below the video player. Last but not least, if you like the video, please give it a thumbs up so YouTube can share it with believers like us. The foundation of every false reality. Shalom, my beloved brothers and sisters, and welcome to day 465 of our exposition of lawlessness. In the most recent podcast, we began analyzing the fundamental degree of deception. Enter misconception. Now, it should be clear that misconception is a very deadly degree of lawlessness. For misconception is the first step you would take towards a false reality. To wit, misconceptions are at the foundation of every false reality. This is how we know that misconceptions plague your mind, for reality is a feature of your mind. Ergo, once the spirit of disregard opens the door for ignorance and deception to enter your thought dimension, they will seek to distort your reality as a priority. This is no doubt a crucial matter, for as I have said aforetime, there can be no salvation where one operates outside of reality. And this is why misconception is so very deadly. Get this. As misconception has the power to distort reality, she also has the power to bring down any society. Now, I touched on this matter at the end of the most recent podcast, and the key takeaway is sure, and I will offer it to you as a treasure box. Misconceptions are a byproduct of disregard and prejudice, to degrees that are largely infecting those who are not walking in the fear of Elohim. Now, this matter is another testament to the dividing line that is situated between the fear of Elohim, and knowledge. And it is another reason why I specifically said you would not succeed in this phase if you are not wearing the girdle of truth. It is because your misconceptions will not only destroy your relationship with the Most High Elohim, but they will also poison every society you are in. Ergo, if you endorse prejudice and disregard, there is no place for you in the United Nation of Israel. And that's the thing you must always keep in mind as we go through these lessons on deception and all the other degrees of lawlessness. To wit, you must always consider how these degrees have the power to destroy spiritual societies. And misconception is at the root of this pending destruction. Therefore, we must continue in our analysis of misconception because here again, she is one of the worst. And because she has made herself a home within this nation, the first shall be last and the last shall be first. Let's get started. The one who persists in darkness. Now, one of the more critical points I made in the most recent podcast reveals that disregard opens the door for misconception to enter your thought dimension. No doubt, this is a key matter for any scenario where disregard is involved has already reached critical status. Along these lines, disregard opens the door for you to have misconceptions about Yahuwah's will, which forces you to see yourself in a false reality. And thus, the following is true. You are the one person you should not have any misconceptions about. And yet, if you operate in disregard, the first person you will have misconceptions about is you. Here lies the problem. Vis-a-vis, if you have misconceptions about Yahuwah's will and you have misconceptions about yourself, you will incur two depressing realities that should be viewed as false. And I will offer these faults to you as a revelation. Per the first fault, you will disqualify yourself from receiving Yahuwah's will. And yet, because you are insane, you will believe that you are yet in his will. This leads to the second fault, vis-a-vis, because you are deceived into believing you are in Yahuwah's will, you will persist deeper into darkness. And you will reach a point where you are convinced that light is darkness and darkness is light. Now, it should be clear that this is a prominent point of no return in our quest. What is worse, our nation is filled with men and women who have progressed far beyond this point. As I said before, they were oblivious to all the exit ramps, warning signs, and the like, which are designed to prevent spiritual disaster. And yet, despite this fact, they just kept going. This is how we know they are spiritually blind, for there is no other scenario where a man would walk off a cliff on purpose unless he were insane. And yet, insanity derives from blindness. Therefore, we should take a closer look at how one could come to be in this disastrous state. The deadliest invasion your mind will ever endure. Now, in beginning to understand how one would descend into this depressed state, we should ask the following question. How were they infected with disregard in the first place? That, my friends, is the question, and we already have the answer. Enter complacency. As you know, complacency is the only degree of lawlessness that has the power to open you up to every other degree. Ergo, complacency initiates the progression of ignorance and deception by infecting you with disregard. If you recall, we analyzed this matter in End Times 504, The Spiritual Disease of Ignorance, Part 4, which was posted on September 8th, 2025. In that podcast, I revealed how the spirit of complacency comes to be in league with the spirit of disregard. To wit, once you defeat the spirit of complacency, he will align himself with 7 unclean spirits that are even deadlier than he is. And one of those spirits is disregard. Here is why. Disregard has the power to open the door to your mind, allowing all the degrees of ignorance and deception to launch the deadliest invasion your mind will ever endure. Notwithstanding, disregard cannot complete her subterfuge if you are operating in the pillars of our faith and being transformed. Ergo, she needs a sidekick vis-a-vis a persistent distraction that will prevent you from operating in the pillars of our faith, which will prevent you from being transformed. And as fate would have it, she has the perfect match. Enter complacency. Now, along these lines, disregard employs the spirit of complacency to distract you to the point where you are oblivious to the invasion of ignorance and deception that is occurring within your mind. It really is a very clever and powerful strategy. However, the wisdom and power of Elohim outranks it. Listen to me. I want you to appreciate what you are up against, but I don't want you to become discouraged by what you are learning. For you can defeat any enemy if you understand his motives and his strategy. And that, my friends, is a focal purpose of this exposition of lawlessness as it pertains to ignorance and deception. We know what they are after. And if you don't remember, allow me to remind you. Ignorance and deception want to change your reality so that you are blind to the truth. For the man who is blind to the truth will never receive knowledge. Here lies the problem. And I have said it many times vis-a-vis the people of Elohim, past and present, have been destroyed due to their lack of knowledge. And thus, we must consider, why are so many within our nation lacking knowledge? The answer is sure. It is because they are infected with ignorance and deception. For they are blind to the truth. And they are blind to the truth because they are not walking in the fear of Elohim. And thus, they are not wearing the girdle of truth. Now, we know these matters to be true because we have followed the linear model of holiness from the very beginning. Ergo, when Yahuwah said subtract, we subtracted. And when he said add, we added, to the point where we have ascended to the plane of knowledge. And now we are adding knowledge to our spiritual arsenal. And very soon we will unlock the sword of the Ruach and possess 5 of the 6 weapons within the whole armor of Elohim. But first, we must continue our campaign against deception. As such, I will share a final section on misconception. the misconceptions we possess. Now, although complacency can do great damage to your mind by teaming up with disregard and misconception, you must remember that you have already defeated complacency. And this knowledge is the key to defeating him again. Along these lines, you can close the door on misconception and disregard if you simply close the door on complacency. Remember, deception can only enter your mind if the door is open. And the only way the door stays open is if you don't deal with complacency. My dear friends, complacency is the root of the problem. And you can deal with any problem, no matter how great or small, if you get to the root of the problem. Now, this is why your prior victory over complacency is so very important. It is because you learned many valuable lessons in obtaining the victory. Here is one of them. Complacency is often most effective when it comes to those matters that we deem are trivial. Ergo, the key to defeating complacency lies in your perspective and viewing every matter the same. My dear friends, this is why I am a huge fan of spiritual values. And it is why values, along with honesty, are 2 degrees of perfection that I refer to constantly. Perhaps you have heard me say, when you are a man of principle, every matter is a matter of principle. Well, now you know why. For a man of principle will not view any matter as trivial, and thus he will never, I say, never be complacent concerning the desire of Elohim. Ergo, we can make the following conclusion, which I will offer to you as a treasure box. Those who fall prey to complacency are men and women who have glaring deficits in their spiritual values. And because they are not honest with themselves, they will be ignorant of these deficits. And because they are complacent, they will not do anything about them, giving deception the opening he needs to wreak havoc in their mind. My dear friends, I hope you can see how these matters are all intricately connected. Likewise, I trust the Ruach of Elohim is hardening your appreciation for the linear model of holiness and how it empowers us to walk in the power of the Tehudah. As I say, the channels of lawlessness are vast, powerful, and intelligent. Ergo, you will not reign over 1 degree by sheer force or will. Quite the contrary, you will need power, intelligence, and strategy. And your strategy for complacency at this interval should be very clear. To wit, you must guard your mind from being deceived into ignoring the spiritual deficits in your life that may appear to be trivial. Trust me, this is a grave misconception, for no spiritual deficit is trivial. And by resisting this falsehood, you will take your first step to closing the door on deception while guarding your mind from the most lethal infection. As for the rest, there is a simple science for purging ourselves of all the misconceptions we possess. And it starts with believing that there is no spiritual deficit too large or too small, for the will of Elohim is for certain, and we should destroy them all. Now, here is the final word. Our misconceptions will turn to dust if we see ourselves how Yahuwah sees us. Brothers and sisters, hear me carefully as I say, the key to guarding yourself from misconception is by overcoming one of the greatest misconceptions that is ingrained into our human nature. That is the false scale by which most men assess their spiritual deficits. Along these lines, many of us believe we are far better than what we really are. 'Tis a major misconception, which causes us to ignore the deficits that are pushing us to the brink of spiritual disaster, the ultimate goal of deception. Heretofore, I recommend, don't put off tomorrow the deficits you can address today, even if you are pressed. For our unwillingness to address our deficits proactively is the source of the misconceptions we possess. Now, here is today's assignment. Meditate on today's lesson, and if you have any questions, please submit them using the form at pinnacleofholiness.com, and I will respond to you as soon as I can. Now, here is what's next. We completed today's podcast, End Times 523, The Spiritual Disease of Deception, Part 3. And the next podcast is entitled The United Nation of Israel, Part 2. I will post this podcast on Friday, October 10th, 2025. Until then, my friends, continue to be led by the Spirit of Elohim, continue to watch, continue to pray, continue in fasting, and most of all, continue to be focused, for the end is coming. The end is near.